It's midweek edition of Business Morning. Thank you for joining us. I am BC Adebayo. We'll begin the program with some good news, perhaps, from the African Development Bank, saying the continent is expected to partially rebound next year from a pandemic-induced economic slump. This is contained in the revised economic outlook on the continent released yesterday by the AFDB, which forecasts a lower 3.4% contraction in gross domestic product in 2020, and that's in contrast to the 3.9% growth projection by the multilateral finance institution before the pandemic. However, the new report, which was originally published before the COVID-19 pandemic, indicates that Africa could still lose nearly $250 billion in economic output this year and in 2021, while the rebound is threatened by risk, including a potentially worsening pandemic, subdued commodity prices, volatile global financial conditions, and natural disasters such as locust infestations. Let's talk about oil prices now. They actually fell today amid concerns that a surge in new coronavirus cases, especially in the U.S., will hamper any recovery in fuel demand. Brent crude futures declined by 0.12% to $42.95 a barrel, while U.S. WTI crude futures fell 0.39%, settling at $40.47 a barrel. Now, 16 U.S. states have reported record increases in new COVID-19 cases in the first 5 days of July, and that's according to a Reuters study. Of course, we continue to monitor developments in the crude oil markets and will continue to bring you updates as they come in. And back home, the new retail price band for petrol pump price of 140 naira and 143 naira 80 kobo has been generating mixed reactions since the announcement by the downstream regulator, the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency. And some marketers have since threatened to halt the loading of petroleum products in protest against the recent increase in the price of petrol due to the lack of consideration for operators' profit margin and the absence of engagements with operators before this decision was taken. But how this has affected compliance level nationwide is our focus on the show this morning. And to discuss that with us on the program is the chairman of the Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Tunji Oyebanji. Good morning, Mr. Oyebanji. Thanks for joining us on the program. Let's begin with you telling us what's the official position of Moman on the new retail price of petrol. That's the band of 140 naira to 143 naira 80 kobo. Is this a glimpse of the deregulation that you're asking for?
Good morning, BC, and it's a pleasure to be on the show once more. I think it's really a reaction more towards the policy behind the prices rather than the prices themselves. As you know, government has said that we are now deregulated. Our own interpretation of that basically is that prices will now go up and down depending on what the landed cost of product into Nigeria is. So we should expect, as international prices go up and down, that we will see more of these kind of changes periodically, depending on what happens on the international market. We believe that this is the way to go because definitely, as we all know, Nigeria can no longer afford to continue to subsidize products in the face of dwindling oil revenues. It's just virtually impossible for us to keep on doing that. I think the only area where we have a slight difference of opinion is that we believe we should go the whole hog and allow the market to be the one to determine the prices rather than by fiat. And the reasons why we say that are not far-fetched. First, we believe that if the market determines the prices, the chances that we will slip back into a subsidy environment are greatly reduced because it's no longer something that is fixed by government. It will be something fixed by the market. And then secondly, when markets influence prices, prices do not change at the same time in every location, everywhere. So, for instance, this last change company A may decide they don't want to change their prices now, depending on their inventory levels, depending on what competitive activities are taking place. So you would find a situation where prices could change in Lagos, may not change in Ibadan, may change in Agege, but not change in Lekki. So, there'll be a mixed bag of how prices would then react. The final point on that is that it will give investors confidence. And if the most important thing we need in our industry today, indeed in the whole country, is investment. Investment will create jobs, it will expand the industry, and I think that is what we need in the country right now.
But if you're talking about the fact that you want the markets to actually be in control of the prices, won't that be a bit high, taking consideration of the fact that, or looking at the disparity in the forex rates at the markets?
Well, even if the market doesn't determine it, as government has said, we are now deregulated. So that means that whenever prices go up internationally, they will also go up locally, whether the market determines the price or not. So I think what really will resolve that problem ultimately for us is for us to increase our refining capacity. And the only thing that will increase refining capacity is to make the environment conducive for investors. You wouldn't want people bringing in billions of dollars to invest on pipelines, on trucking, on refining, but they're not sure of their returns because somebody has to determine the price, not the market. And that person determining the price may not take the economic factors into consideration. Consideration may be more political than economic.
All right, now we understand that the increase translates to almost around 1 million naira on every 45,000 liters. What will be the impact of that on your profit margin today?
Well, again, this is one area that, we need to explain. That 1 million naira is not profit. People tend to think that everything that the pump price is all profit for the people, the operators. No, our profit is only a very small percentage of the pump price that you see at the pump. And that is determined by government. It's fixed as part of the pricing template set up by PPRA. And that has only been adjusted, I guess, about 4 or 5 days ago for the first time in about 4 years. So this increase, the element that has to do with our profit is very, very minute. In fact, one of the issues that we have in ongoing consultations with the regulatory agency is that the current margins has been granted do not cover the entire costs involved in importation and in distribution.
Affected the compliance rates across fuel stations?
First and foremost, we have to remember under the current policy, the prices are fixed by government and we are bound by law to comply with those prices. But as you may expect, changing pump prices in over 30,000 retail outlets across the country is not always an easy task, given the situation, the distances involved, and so on and so forth. But it's an ongoing exercise. Like I said, by law, we are bound to comply with those laws, and I'm sure that very soon you will see that level of compliance being at 100% level. Again, like I said earlier, if this was market-driven, what you would find is that this expectation of immediate compliance with the price would not be there, simply because reactions by different marketers would be the same depending on this area or that area, competitive activity, economic capability, and purchasing power in different economic zones. So a lot of things would go into pricing decisions that are set by the market, rather than this situation where it is done officially, and then everybody is expecting immediate compliance, which doesn't always happen.
Talking about compliance, why does it appear that usually if there's supposed to be an increase in the pump price of petrol, we see quick compliance by these marketers as to the way they comply quickly when the prices have to be reduced?
Oh, I wish I had the whole day to explain this, but the real reason really has to do with the working capital of the operators. If you have stock in your tank worth, call it 100 naira, and there's a reduction in the price, it means your stock has lost immediate value. And therefore, to help yourself, you will have to sell that old stock as long as you can so that all your working capital is not eroded. On the contrary, if the price goes up, you have to adjust quickly because the next time you have to go and buy, you have to buy at a higher price. So this is all about preserving your working capital. People have to realize that the operators, the small operators, they are actually business people who have gone to borrow this working capital from the banks, and they are paying interest on it. And that is why, again, if market determines the price, these changes would be gradual, depending on the kind of inventory levels that people have. So people are just reacting to the fact that there's just an official announcement, you're expected to comply immediately. And therefore, people tend to try and smoothen out the shocks to their working capital. So that's really the simple explanation behind it. It's not out of people wanting to exploit anybody or anything. It's just that people borrow money at high interest rates. When you cut the price, their working capital is eroded immediately on the spot. If you increase the price, because they are still going to replace that product, they need to sell it at the higher price so that, again, they don't have to go and borrow more money to add to their working capital. And these are individual Nigerians like you and I who just happen to be in the petrol business.
All right. Now, one of the issues is the fact that some other operators have been asking the NNPC to revert to the earlier ex-depot price of 130 naira 72 kobo. But if that's the case now, what would be the right petrol pump price for the market today?
Well, I'm not sure I really understand that, because essentially going back in price now would mean automatically we are back into the subsidy regime, which, like I said earlier, we cannot afford anymore as a country. We don't have the revenue to sustain it. I think the people are actually complaining more about the fact that even with this recent adjustment that has been made, the distribution costs are not fully covered. We continue to be in dialogue, with the PPPRA on this subject so that they will understand all the costs that are involved in importing products. And if you set a price at a level where all those costs are not recovered, then it's not sustainable, because it means the more you are losing money. And I'm sure that government's intention is for all of us to be involved in importation. So I think maybe this is the issue that is really these people are trying to attract attention to, rather than the price itself.
So have you had any dialogue with the PPPRA over this, and what has been the outcome, if you have?
Dialogue is ongoing. We must commend the government, both the minister, the GMD of NNPC, and indeed the PPRA for, reaching out and engaging with the industry extensively. In fact, this time around, the level of consultation, I would say, has been unprecedented. So I think all this helps. It all goes well. We're not where we need to be, but we believe that as we continue to dialogue with the government, things will only get better for us. We're all in this together. We all have a stake. It's our country. We need to grow the industry. We need to make it sustainable long term. But at the same time, we recognize that there are other conditions or other issues that we all need to take into consideration.
Now, yes, you say you're dialoguing with the government, but if the government actually sticks to this price now, what would be your next line of action? As we've heard already of some threats that certain operators are set to stop loading petroleum products, protesting against the recent increase. What would Moment do on its part?
No, for us, we always believe dialogue is the best path. We believe that that is what will yield results. And we believe that government has continued to have open doors to listen to us. We've continued to make our case, and they're reflecting on our input. So we believe that really is the way to go. It's not easy. It hasn't been easy in the industry for a long time because, well, as you know, we were owed huge subsidy payments over the years. Even this recent adjustment in our margins was the first time in 4 years, and before that, I think the last time was in 2008. So it has really been tough. Many of the companies involved have actually had to close shop. So we believe that as we dialogue, the understanding on the need to have a market-driven industry that is sustainable, that will attract investment, that will bring expansion in the industry, and which will create jobs and will reduce our reliance on importation of refined products. All these things are good for the country, they're good for the industry, and I believe that we will continue to dialogue with government to achieve the necessary goals.
With the recent convergence in exchange rates, what are the likely implications on petrol import?
Well, hopefully the first thing that would do is that it should hopefully attract more foreign exchange inflow into the country, because then the kind of gap between what is perceived to be the official rate and what the autonomous rate would more or less come together, which means more forex that normally would go through informal channels will now come through official channels. And that means more forex would be available for those of us who want to import refined products. As you know, even though we can import, the availability of forex has continued to be a major problem for us. The other thing that is a problem is even where you can get it, at what rate can you get it? If you get it at what you may describe as the autonomous rate today, and you apply that to the PPRA template, then the prices that we are even selling now would be unrealistic. So we hope this is something that will augur well for the industry in terms of availability of forex, which will enable us to import. But you know, we're still not there yet. We continue to dialogue with the government in terms of being able to source forex.
We'd like to thank you, the chairman of Major Oil Marketers Association of Nigeria, Mr. Tunji Oyebanji, for speaking with us on Business Morning.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
We'll take a moment now, and when we return in just a moment, we will be dissecting Vertiva Capital's management's report on Nigeria's half-year economic outlook. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The second half of the year is still fresh, and more investment banking firms and research analysts have been releasing their projections for the rest of the year that started out with the coronavirus outbreak. And just like other forecasts, investment bankers Vertiva Capital Management is projecting a technical recession for Nigeria in the next 6 months of the year. Of course, that's due to the pandemic. And the analysts also see some debt sustainability crisis head on, and one with a contagious effect that is expected to rattle the global markets, but with respite in the medium to long term. Well, let's join the head for equity research, or the lead for equity research at Vertiva Capital Management, Luke Ofojebe, for some insight into these predictions. Good morning, Luke. Thanks for joining us on the program. Give us an overview of your economic outlook report for the second half of the year.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. So going by our outlook report titled "The Viral Shock." We expect the Nigerian economy to slide into recession, a technical recession, by the way, in the third quarter of the year. And the reason is mainly due to the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. So prior to February this year, when we started recording cases of COVID-19 in the country, the expectation was that the Nigerian economy is going to grow by 2.5%, and that was in line with consensus estimates as well as projections from multilateral institutions like the IMF and World Bank. But COVID-19 happened, and a number of analysts had to revise their expectations because of this. So going by what we've seen so far, the expectation is that the Nigerian economy is going to contract for the full year. By our projection, we expect the Nigerian economy to contract by about 0.6%. From what we've seen so far, we think the sectors that will be affected the most will be the consumer goods sector as well as the oil and gas sector. So for the consumer goods, the expectation is that consumer spend is likely going to drop, most likely going to drop due to the fact that disposable income is going to shrink during this period. We've already started seeing cases of job losses as well as salary cuts, and we still have inflation on the other hand at 2 digits. So what that means is that disposable income is really going to moderate this period, and that means that consumer spend on consumer products is also going to decline. So as a result of that, we see a decline in demand for consumer products, and that's consequently going to impact consumer output. And besides that, we still have disruptions to supply chains for the consumer goods producers. So for a number of them, for instance, if you look at the jewelry space, we understand that clubs, bars, and some restaurants are still closed. And for the ones that are open, they are operating below 50% capacity utilization. So for a number of these companies, we will be seeing declining turnover as well as declining bottom line. And from what Guinness released recently on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the firm highlighted that investors should not really be surprised when they see their interim results for the fourth quarter of 2020. And the reason is that COVID-19 has really impacted the supply chains of the firm. So what that means is that we'll be seeing significant declines in turnover as well as bottom line. And this cuts across board for a number of consumer goods companies listed on the NSE. Then when you look at the industrial goods sector, I mean, that's a sector that is highly correlated with the oil market performance. So when we see oil prices at good levels, it means that governments will have more in terms of oil revenue and be able to spend more on capex projects. But since March this year, we've seen like a slump in oil prices. It even got worse in the month of April, where we started seeing negative WTI prices. Although we've seen some recoveries in oil prices, but compared to pre-COVID-19 levels, we think they are still trading at we think oil prices are still trading at very low levels. And in terms of projection for government oil revenue, we expect it to decline by more than 50% in 2020. So what that means is that it's going to impact the ability of the government to spend more on capex projects, and consequently, it's going to impact the performance of industrial goods companies like Dangote Cement, Boa Cement, as well as WAPCO, that's Lafarge Africa. So for the industrial goods sector, it's also going to be a negative year for them. Then when you look at banking, the financial services is also not excluded. So for banking, for instance, we are going to see a trend of lower interest income among all the major banks we have listed on the NSE. And this is because for the companies in the real sector, you are going to see them struggling because of lesser demand for their products. So a number of them might not be able to meet up with their debt obligations. So you might start seeing cases of loan defaults. So for these banks, you definitely see lower interest income. A number of these banks will also need to restructure their loans in order to preserve the assets the asset quality in their books. So we might see them extending their moratoriums. We might see them coming up with moratoriums for loans that previously had no moratoriums, just to preserve their asset quality. So for the banks, we think what can really cushion their earnings during this period will be non-interest income. That's income from fees and commission. We understand that at this very moment, a number of people will be trying to observe social distancing in order to prevent being infected with the virus. So given this, a number of people actually prefer to carry out cashless transactions. They want to make less interactions with cash. So what we are going to see is we'll see bank customers making use of mobile platforms as well as internet-based platforms to carry out transactions. So we'll be seeing banks recording sizable fees and commissions from these platforms that will help to cushion their earnings. However, we do not think this will be strong enough to subdue the impact of lower interest income we'll be seeing going forward. So for the banks, all in all, it's also going to be a negative year. So for the oil and gas sector, I mean, that's pretty clear to everyone. We are going to be seeing, we've already seen the slump in oil prices. At the moment, Brent is trading at $42 per barrel. That's the benchmark for Nigerian crude. And of course, we've seen like some recoveries in oil prices, mainly due to the fact that a number of economies all over the world have started reopening their economies. And so what that means is that we'll be seeing improvement in oil demand going forward. However, we do not think oil demand is going to recover to pre-COVID-19 levels. And the reason is that a number of services firms will start embracing work from home as the new normal. So what that means is we'll be seeing a significant amount of workforce all over the world being taken off the road. So that's less demand for petroleum products. And also for the aviation industry, we think that industry will take a long time to recover. I mean, we started seeing some economies reopening their airports and the likes, but we do not think we'll recover in that sector.
If I may just come in here, because we actually don't have, so much time. But one of the themes that has characterized almost every economic outlook reports lately is the looming global economic recession, and that's often described as the worst since the World War, and for Nigeria, the harshest since the 1970s, of course, which many have explained as a technical recession. But how can the federal government actually cushion the effects of this expectation?
So at the moment, the only option available for the government is really to spend its way out of recession. So the government should be looking at raising more debt. Of course, we understand that this will have its own implications on government spending going forward. But as it stands, that's pretty much the only option the government has. So the government needs to look at raising more debt in order to spend its way out of recession. The government also needs to address this FX liquidity constraint. We understand that for some time now, foreign portfolio investors have been stranded in the economy. A number of them want to leave, but due to limited FX supply, they've not been able to. So it's something that the government also needs to address. So it's not just for the foreign portfolio investors, because for these guys, it's more of hot money. So they just look at where they can find high returns. So I think what the government should be more concerned with is the systemic risk that FX liquidity can have on the economy. And in this case, I'm referring to the impact on foreign direct investments, because these are investments that can actually help to support sustainable growth in the economy. And given what we've seen so far, I mean, in 2016, we saw a devaluation, and now we've seen another devaluation in 2020. So does it mean that anytime we see significant slump in oil prices, we are going to see a devaluation? So for foreign direct investors, these are what they will be looking at. If I need to invest in this country, when I need to repatriate my income, will I be going through FX devaluation? So that's something the government also needs to address. And in our view, what we think the government should do, first and foremost, is try to unify all the rates or the multiple foreign exchange rates we have in the economy into one single rate. So that way, foreign investors can have clarity on the exchange rate at which they are coming into the market and the rate at which they are leaving it, and the rate at which they will be leaving the market. More so, the overall impact definitely, even though government still needs to spend, we still do not rule out the fact that the economy is most likely going to contract, going by whatever the government will do. However, for next year, we start seeing recoveries, because what it means is that this year is going to create a very low base for comparison. So next year we'll be seeing strong economic growth. However, that is not really is not based on the fact that the government is putting the right plans in place towards achieving that level of growth. It's just mainly due to the low base we'll be seeing this year. So at this point in time, we also think it's a time for the government to look inwards and see how it can actually maximize its strength in the global space. I mean, the world is, as we all know, is already becoming it's already becoming a global village where we are seeing more and more interactions between countries due to increasing penetration of technology. So I think at this moment, the government should be looking at maximizing its strength. And one of these key areas that the government needs to address is agriculture. And when I say agriculture, it goes beyond just crop farming and cattle rearing. We should also be looking at refined agriculture. So, for instance, the government is one of the major producers of cocoa, but we do not produce chocolate. So that's something the government should be looking at. The government should be looking at expanding its refined agriculture space, and that's what a number of countries in North Africa are actually doing at the moment. We've seen Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt.
Look, I would also like us to talk about the part of your report where you mentioned that it's not all doom and gloom, of course, as the oil and telecom sectors hold some promise. Could you tell us more about that?
So for the oil sector, of course, we are going to see the negative impact on that sector. We have already seen the slump in oil prices. It's definitely going to affect oil revenue for a number of the players in the industry. But for the government, really, the expectation is that oil revenue is going to decline. But given the growth we saw in Q1, the oil sector grew by more than 4%. And that was mainly due to additional output we saw from the Egina field that came online last year. So we think that will actually help to cushion oil outputs going forward. In Q2, of course, we understand that the data is not yet out, but given what we've seen so far, it's most likely that oil output must have contracted in Q2. Then in Q3, as we see more economies reopening their economies, more countries reopen their economies, we think that will help to support oil demand. And going forward, we see like slight upticks in Nigeria's crude output. But overall, it's going to be a negative year for the players in the oil and gas industry. So for the telecoms, I think these are the players in this sector will be the ones that will be least impacted by COVID-19 because given this current situation where a number of people are trying to observe social distancing, we understand that for some companies, a number of their employees are still working from home, so they are going to be spending more on data. And for the ones that are at home, they are going to be enticed to make subscriptions for streaming packages. So these things will definitely drive top-line growth for the telecommunications industry players.
All right,
then for the downstream segment as well,
okay. Just have to wrap up the conversation at this point as we're actually pressed for time. But would like to thank you, the lead for equity research at Vetifa Capital Management, Luke Ofojobe, for speaking with us on the program.
Thank you for having me today.
Now, just before we head to the markets now, the new Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Lamido Yuguda, says the capital market is a driver of growth and development for Nigeria post-COVID-19 and beyond. Mr. Yuguda, who made this known while resuming alongside 3 executive commissioners, explains that the Capital Market Master Plan, which was launched in 2014, has the objective of positioning the capital market for an accelerated development of the national economy and he assures that investor protection remains a major focus for the capital market regulator, while the new management will continue to work with other relevant stakeholders to promote and implement initiatives to improve the regulation and the development of the market. It's time now to do a review of Tuesday's numbers at the Nigerian equities markets with Eddie Iwan. Good morning, Eddie. So investors finally got to smile yesterday.
Good morning, BC. Finally, there was some positive sentiment in the market yesterday, which is largely attributed to bargain hunting on Airtel Africa, Boa Cement, and Zenith Bank, but that pushed the all-share index up by 0.30% to 24,097.48 points. Investors gained about 37.26 billion naira yesterday, and that pushed the equity cap to 12.570 trillion naira. However, volume was a bit lower yesterday. We saw about 155.52 million shares worth 2.60 billion naira traded in over 4,000 deals. It's a similar picture on the activity chart yesterday compared to Monday's session, where we saw 2 sectors post gains and 3 declined. So banking index was up by 0.92%. Of course, that's still that was as most lenders posted gains on that counter. Consumer goods declined by 0.52%, and that was thanks to losses on Unilever, which declined about 9.78%. Industrial goods rose marginally by 0.09% as investors decided to take advantage of the lower stock prices on Boa Cement. Insurance reversed Monday's gains and declined by almost 2%, while oil and gas declined marginally by 0.02%. As you can see, that was, due to the decline on MRS. But I'm being joined by David Adonri, a stockbroker at High Cap Securities, for more. Good morning, Mr. Adonri. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. It's a pleasure being with you.
How is the market reacting to the resumption of the new SEC DG, Dr. Lamido Yuguda?
Well, that is an important event, but I don't think it's affecting the direction of the capital market, as equities remain weak and financial assets continue to migrate to the debt market due to the weak state of Nigeria's macro economy.
So the gains we saw yesterday in the markets, are they sustainable, or we shouldn't get our hopes up yet?
The market will be very volatile. That is that today there will be marginal gain, tomorrow the market will lose again, and so on and so forth. We are still in the buyer's market in this season, and also as a result of the weak macroeconomic situation and the precarious situation arising from the COVID pandemic that the economy faces. So we are going to be in a phase where the equities market will remain a buyer's market for quite some time, and then the debt market will become stronger. If you look at what is happening in the debt market now, that is where all the activities are shifting to. The yield on bonds has been declining steadily as the prices rise, as volumes pick up massively in that sector. So we are going to be seeing sporadic movements in activities in the equities market, perhaps only specific to particular sectors that are not severely vulnerable to the downturn in the economy now, and as a result of the forecast that faces the equities market.
Thank you for your input on the program, Mr. Adonri. David Adonri is a stockbroker at High Cap Securities. Over to you, BC.
All right, Eddie, let's hope that the market maintains the positive momentum today. Well, we'll do an opening call to London as well as the debt and currencies markets when we return in just a moment. Do stay with us. Let's cross over now to London to find out what business headlines are making the rounds this morning with Juliana Olayinka. Good morning, Juliana. So Chancellor Rishi Sunak will be speaking later today, and he'll be announcing a £2 billion temporary job creation scheme for the under-20s. Is this Sunak's way of responding to the growing fears of a surge in youth unemployment?
Good morning, Bissy. Absolutely it is. It's a pretty big day for Chancellor Rishi Sunak. He's had a couple of big days over the past couple of months, but this is a really important summer statement. It's only supposed to be a statement, but the media are already dubbing it a mini budget, and it appears as if youth unemployment is going to be one of the key things that Boris Johnson's government is going to try and tackle. A lot of critics and the opposition Labour Party have really made it a key point to say that it's young people between the age of 16 to 24 that are likely going to bear the brunt of the COVID-19 economic fallout, especially when it comes to being made redundant. There's usually a case of first in, first out. And we already know that 1 in 10 16 to 24-year-olds here in the UK have lost their job with regards to COVID-19. 3 in 10 of them are currently being furloughed. And we do know that once that furlough scheme starts tapering out, there will be more redundancies to follow. So what we're expecting today at lunchtime is that Chancellor Sunak will announce the Kickstart scheme. It's £2 billion worth of funding that will be paid to employers. To employ 16 to 24-year-olds, they'll be paid a minimum wage of about £250 a week. And those that can apply for this Kickstart scheme will be people that are already receiving universal credit. If a young person does become part of the scheme, then employers will also have the opportunity to top up their funds. So it's really seen as a good scheme. It's being heralded already. So far at the moment, I believe unemployment in the UK stands roughly at about 3.9%. But of course, once that job retention scheme starts tapering off next month, we're likely to see more. So before that, the government want to, step in and make sure that the very young in society can start stimulating the economy.
But aside from this job scheme, what else are the people hoping to hear from Sunak?
Well, there are lots of measures. I believe we discussed on this programme yesterday that £3 billion green pledge. Household owners will be receiving a voucher of about £5,000 to £10,000 to try and refurbish their homes. Britain have set a worldwide net goal of having zero carbon emissions within the country by 2050. And to do this, a lot of infrastructure needs to take place. Of course, early last week, Prime Minister Boris Johnson really set the tone for what this statement will provide by accelerating that £5 billion infrastructure development project, which is really going to focus on the West Midlands and the north of the country, which for decades, well, certainly under a Conservative government, have felt that they've been left behind. So really, this is going to build upon that statement that the Prime Minister gave last week. So we're expecting that green pledge. We're expecting that £2 billion kickstart fund for the youth. We're also potentially going to be hearing about a stamp duty cut for people that are trying to get on the housing ladder. We know that the housing market is pretty stagnant at the moment, and Chancellor Rishi Sunak may be trying to, urge young people to start looking into buying a home. At the moment, I believe if a home is about £125,000, you've got to pay quite a high tax on that property, but that threshold is expected to rise to £300,000. That's causing a lot of controversy with property builders and those within the sector, because as soon as there's a whiff of the government doing that, people put property purchasing on hold until that announcement's been made. We're also potentially going to expect a cut in VAT. VAT currently stands at 20% in the UK. The hospitality sector opened on Saturday, and according to the latest statistics, the footfall was pretty underwhelming. And to try and get people to start spending again, to try and get people to start visiting restaurants, there potentially may be a cut in VAT. But of course, this is all speculation. We won't know until lunchtime.
Right, Juliana, Boohoo's troubles continue as retailers, including Next, ASOS and Amazon, have removed all its clothing from sale. However, the online fashion retailer has announced that it will launch an independent review of its UK supply chain. But the question is, would Boohoo ever see an end to this?
They will see an end to this. Whether or not it will benefit them is another question. But Boohoo are in trouble. The trouble started early last week with a report suggesting that their wholesaler has links to modern slavery, wherein it pertains to some factories that they used to make their clothes in Leicester. We know that last week Leicester was the first city in the UK to be put down to a local lockdown, and a lot of the COVID-19 infections were said to arise from factories that were dealing in textiles. And Boohoo have obviously been caught up in this, especially it comes at a time where there's a lot of civil unrest. We had, of course, what happened in America with George Floyd. People are trying to take down statues. So any links to modern slavery at the moment is corporate hell, really. And Boohoo are paying the price of that. At the moment, since Monday at early trading, £1.5 billion has been wiped off their market value. Lots of celebrity influencers are distancing themselves from them. And as you said, we've also heard a lot of big companies such as Next, ASOS, Zoolander. They've all said that they will no longer be stocking Boohoo products. And this is not just Boohoo. Boohoo also own a really popular brand called Pretty Little Thing and other brands. So they're in a lot of trouble. They have announced early today that they will be launching an internal inquiry. We're expecting the results of that in September when they give their first half of the year trading announcement. And there'll be a further update from them in January 2021. Is it too late? Potentially. They will be hoping not. But we've also got Priti Patel, the Home Secretary in the UK, saying that she will also be doing an internal inquiry. So it's pretty bad news for Boohoo. But yes, as I said, just not a great time to be caught up in a modern slavery row when in the West people are fighting for civil justice.
I can imagine, Juliana. Well, thank you, and we'll see you again at 1:30. And it's back to Eddie Young for the Debt and Currencies Market Review. Over to you, Eddie.
Thanks, BC. While looking at the fixed income market, the bond market maintained its relatively quiet trend in yesterday's session with minimal volume seen across board. However, there was some selling seen across and yields rose by 8 basis points on average. We saw some buying interest there. We saw 9 deals worth 4.90 billion. Now, the Treasury bills markets were still quiet yesterday. We saw just 2 deals on that counter worth 500 million naira. Moving to the automobiles market, average yields across the curve increased by 8 basis points with sell pressure seen on the short and mid end of the curve. We had just 14 deals worth 16 billion naira. But let's talk to Chioma Udu, a fixed income dealer at GT Bank for more. Good morning, Chioma. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We understand that there was a statutory debit yesterday in relation to AMCON. Talk to us about the implication of this on today's trading day.
Okay, like you earlier mentioned, we've seen like a bearish bias at the table space. This is as a result of banks trying to fund their immediate needs. The money market opened down about 200 billion. Rates of the market is about 30 and 35 at the interbank overnight market. So we've seen some banks trying to discount their bills, their short-term bills, to fund their immediate needs. As a result of that, we saw a little turnover of the T-bill space. Banks that have funds try to take up the bargain buys, because there's a lot more offers than we used to really see in the past days. So banks that had funds took advantage and did some buying, and then banks that didn't have funds, they discounted to fund themselves.
There was more profit-taking on bonds yesterday. Is that sentiment likely to continue today?
Because of the low yields we've seen across the spectrum, we've seen bargain profit-taking, but we don't expect that to happen as much because next week is where we're going to see a game changer. About 250 billion is going to mature from automobiles, and then coupon payments are coming to the system. So we're going to see a lot of interest in that space. So it's going to be a lot of bargain buying from next week. The profit-taking year, now that the rates are lower, we're going to expect that investors will take advantage of that and then resume the purchase across the Gulf of Mexico when liquidity flows into the system.
Thank you for your input, Choma. Choma Udu is a fixed income dealer at GT Bank. Well, that is on the Market Review, BC. Let's hope for a profitable trading day.
As always, Eddie, thanks for the updates. And that's where we wrap up today's program. Thank you so much for watching. I am BC Adebayo.